Welcome to Off the Shelf. I'm your host, Yvonne Wolf. Today our special guest is Mike Lauesen. He is a former business owner and the author of Getting Off the Treadmill. Welcome, Mike.
Thank you, Yvonne. It's a pleasure to be here.
So tell us a little bit about how you started writing Getting Off the Treadmill.
Well, years ago I was going to write a business book, and I had an outline. It's probably about 12 years ago. And at some point I put it to the shelf literally and thought, that doesn't make sense. There's so many great business books. But as I began to observe the world today, this digital world we live in, even with native digitals, I began to see that, frankly, people weren't paying attention. And that with all these thousands of messages we get a day, whether they be on TV, whether they be on Twitter, Facebook, email, text,
Yeah.
it's hard to pay attention and to focus and not sleepwalk through life. So that's why I decided I'm going to write about this.
Yes. We're trying to move from multitasking to unitasking.
I don't know if multitasking is even possible.
Yes.
In an efficient way.
Right. They say on the brain waves and studies, they say you can't be good at any one of those tasks when
And I think auto accidents prove that.
Yes.
People, you see them in their cars, they're just not paying attention, they're behind you, they're coming up close on you.
So what is the alpha wave you talk about? Like you want to, when you're reading, you are in that zone.
I had a presenter in my business group that I was in for years called Tech Now Vistage, which I am a part of as a chair facilitator. And Stephen Snyder had this whole presentation on how powerful the alpha state is. So we just look up on brain waves. We've got delta and theta and theta are kind of this dreamlike state, right, or deep sleep. And then the alpha state is not only a waking state, but a total focus concentration state. I'm looking right at you and I am focused, right? Small children live in this state, 3, 4, and 5-year-olds. They are totally focused in whatever they might be doing. We lose this.
Yes.
We get corrupted, we have all these other things, and we learn how to tell time. Right? So this alpha state is a powerful brainwave because when we can get there, which we can, whether it be reading, meditation, prayer, contemplation, it allows us to reduce stress, lose track of time, and not be on the treadmill.
And then we start thinking more mindfully.
Mindfully, contemplatively, the type of things I think that unleash this power of the brain, which is both the conscious and the unconscious. The other state outside of alpha, which is next, is beta, right? Where this kind of divided attention, where we are knowing all this other stuff's going on and it's hard to just focus.
So beta is like when we're driving home, the
Beta's
same route.
driving home, we're listening, we're watching. We have to focus, right? We have to focus on many different things. It's hard to just focus on one. When we get on autopilot, we get home and we go, how did we get here?
Right.
I'm not
That's
sure
what
if that's
thinking.
good or bad.
Yeah. Yes. And then alpha wave is it when people play computer games. Are they in that alpha too?
I don't know scientifically.
Yeah, it feels
but I
like
would
it.
say that there's no question there's a loss of time, right? You don't know what time it is because you're so immersed in the activity. So the alpha state is we're so immersed that people could be talking to us in a low voice or louder and we don't hear them. I think in the gaming, there's probably that small percent that it's addictive, which might not be so, right, might not be so great. But on the other side, where it's total focused and it's concentration and it allows them to relax and have a challenge, which Mihaly talks about that in his book, Flow, which I reference in my book. There's 7 attributes for flow, but one of them is this timelessness and there's somewhat of a challenge and we have the skill set to do it.
So this is your book is very good. I read your book. That is what I like about it is interactive. There are parts that you want the reader to write something, to think about, to take the steps to see what you want to do.
My youngest daughter, Taylor, and my son, Connor, had these ideas of the physical tools of my dad's trade as a lather. A lot of people think, what's a lather? Well, it's lath and plaster. Kind of like a carpenter, but in metal. And these tools of the trade, I started to think about what are the tools we need in our kit to be able to have a fulfilling and intentional life, right? And that's why the foundation of the toolkit is paying attention. It's like my dad being able to read a blueprint was the foundation of his work. He could have a great tool belt, he could have a number of tools, but if he didn't have that foundation, right, of the blueprint, for us, we've got to pay attention. Alpha is a state we can go into pay attention. Flow is a state. I talk about in the book, my mom had a wonderful gift of paying attention to all 8 of us. I had 7 siblings.
Right, right.
And you know, she'd put down her cigarette or her beer, and she'd have a book in her hand, but she'd put down that book the minute we walked into the room. And she gave us the purity of her attention. What a gift. Right?
Yes.
What a gift she gave me and all my siblings.
And you're a keynote speaker.
I am a keynote speaker. I have so much fun with this. It was one of the reasons I wanted to have this book, you know, published and edited professionally, was to be able to have the opportunity to make a difference in people's lives. As I mentioned, my core purpose, although altruistic today, about wanting to give back all the love I've received and make a positive difference in every person I come in contact with, it wasn't always that, right? At one point it was just to get food on the table, provide for my kids, maybe get marry my high school sweetheart Barbara, those type of things. So when I look at the toolkit, as it evolved over time, it really became even more powerful for me, right? And starting to utilize it and live out what I'm trying to write.
Well, you mentioned that in their busy world, you had to make a decision to put marriage first.
Yes.
Right? Put your marriage first. I mean, because there's so many things that we're struggling with. Sometimes our personal relationship is the first to feel the strain.
You have a great recall on the book, and Kenneth Lehman's book, you know, How to Keep Your Family Together While the World's Falling Apart. As I reference in it, Barbara's doing her PhD. We have, at that time, I believe, 4 small children. And he's like a therapist, counselor, and he's writing this book that you have to put your marriage first.
Yes.
And Babs and I look at each other like, this guy's crazy. How could we put our marriage first? We've got to turn the corner on the business. Babs is working on her dissertation.
Yeah.
We've got 4 small mouths to feed. The business hasn't turned the corner, and so forth. And Kenneth Lehman was right, and which is really where the centering for me was relationships.
And
Our
that's the
loved
most
ones, our
important
family. It's the most important thing,
relationship,
at least it is to me.
Yes.
Right? What else is permanent? But the relationships and the relationships we have even when our loved ones pass away. So I still have a relationship with my mom and dad because of all those wonderful things they taught me growing up.
I certainly feel that way with my father, who passed
Yeah.
away 20 years ago. And so you talk about Vistage. Yes. How did you find a publisher? Is this somehow related?
Within the Vistage community, there's about 22,000 members around the world, and each group's about 14 to 16. So I was a 16-year member. And after I exited my business, I wanted to still be able to give back and still be involved in the business world. So I started a group, certainly with help of Vistage International. I'm not an employee of theirs. And within Vistage, you have subject matter experts that come in and present for half a day to your group. And I'd heard about this gentleman who talked about storytelling, Henry DeVries of Indie Books. And Henry is an editor and a publisher. He's got a boutique press in San Diego. And as I started to talk to him, you know, he says, yeah, we do this all the time. We do it sometimes for Vistage chairs, sometimes for other people. And he's a writer himself. He's written many books. And I said, well, how does this work? And that's how I got started, frankly. I could tell.
So before you're finished with your book, Mike, you already met a publisher.
Well before. I hadn't started the book, Yvonne.
So you didn't have to look for a publisher after you're done with the book.
I
So
didn't.
it's the other way.
And I, you know, he sent me all his literature, and I said, well, how does this work? And he says, well, what do you want to write about? And I said, well, I kind of mentioned about, I didn't have this title, but I kind of mentioned about, look, I think people are sleepwalking through life.
Yes.
And his suggestion was, look, why don't you write your thoughts down for the next 30 days? So I did. Then he looked at them all. He says, there's some themes. Do you see the themes? I go, yeah, I see some themes, which were some of the chapter titles.
Yeah.
You write some more. So I wrote some more. And then at that point, then we searched for the title. And I literally we were talking for 75 minutes, and he must have been on his computer. He lives in San Diego.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And I said something like, get off the treadmill, right?
Yes.
He goes, hold on a minute. And that's how that became the title of the book.
In the cover, did you have to buy the rights to that, or did you have to take that picture or own the
I left that
rights?
up to Henry and his team as a graphic designer.
Yeah, sometimes the publishers
so
take care of that.
they had several covers to suggest. My Vistage group was very kind to kind of evaluate their own. I talked to my kids about it, and we ended up meshing a couple of colors. We certainly felt it was great to have a female, it'd be great to have a person of color, and also this time clock with the treadmill was
Right.
certainly
Gears turning.
Right, time. Yeah, was not my idea. I'd love to say it was, but it was somehow through Henry's team with their graphic designer, and we meshed a couple of them, and that's how we got the cover.
Yes. So you turned out this book pretty fast. Is it
Well,
months
it depends.
rather than a
Yeah, it depends upon what's fast.
when you started writing? When he
when
said,
I started writing
"Give
to the
me-"
time it
yeah.
literally came out was 3 years.
Okay.
Now, Henry would tell you can write a lot faster than that, and that's true.
Yes.
But I also had other things I was doing. At
Right.
the time, I had 3 Vistage groups I was running. I had 30 one-to-ones. Trying to be a parent. I was doing a lot of things at my church, and but what I did was scheduled time. And so I worked with Henry for the first year, and then continued to work on things on all the chapters. And then I, through really probably a lark and maybe a God moment, I found a book coach named Joanne Doby who lives in Chicago.
Okay.
And she worked on helping me become a better writer.
I see. I noticed the examples are all very current, very apropos.
Thank you.
So I thought it must have been much shorter than 3 years. But sometimes we need to organize our thoughts. Like
Correct.
choose the right stories and
You have to
fit
choose the
those
right
in.
stories when I was writing the chapter Forgive, which has a lot to do with what happened to my son at 13 years of age. That took the longest, and it was the most emotional. And it was cathartic. And I frankly, I cried a lot reading it out loud, right? And then I just worked linear from, the first chapter to Trapped on the Treadmill to Uncovering Your Life Purpose to Pay Attention to Utilizing Goals. And then when I got to the last chapter, it was going to be High Road, which is chapter 8 now.
Yes.
Good Tired was 8. We switched it. And this is why you need mentors and coaches. And at my first draft, Joanne and I are chatting on the phone, which we do about every 2 weeks for an hour and a half to 2 hours. And as kind as she could say, this was not my best work, chapter 9, the last chapter. And then she said, it's got to be your best chapter. So it's kind of birthing process could just continue to occur. Zinsser, I think it's William Zinsser, who wrote a book called On Writing Well. He's a Yale professor for many years. That book was very helpful, right? And my wife's a PhD. She's written a dissertation. My son is working on his PhD, almost done. 2 of my daughters have masters. They're all much more educated than I am. So they were good critics too, and good editors.
Yes. When it comes to writing, I guess you're looking for the same energy as your first chapter and the pace.
Yes, I would, and I think it's hard to find that because as you evolve, I think you become better, right? But then you
Yes.
look at somebody like Ken Follett, who I love as an author, right? You're going, all of his stuff is great to me, right? From his big book, Pillars of the Earth,
Yes.
to his trilogy that came out and his most recent I haven't read. But I do think you do build momentum. Yes. And as this, for me, it was this linear, but also where do you put this toolkit and where does each one belong, right? Pay attention to the foundation. When I thought of Start Simply, it's really kind of a simple tool, but it could be very deep when we talk about that categories of life in 168 hours. And then my dad had a hammer. That was the analogy, because everybody needs a hammer if you're in the trade of the building trades.
Yes. So you speak at some of the libraries, right? And you talk about your book, but you're usually doing workshops, right? Or is it, is it part of your marketing of your book? Yeah.
It is part marketing of the book. I'll do anything from a 20-minute talk within Rotary, something like that, or 30 minutes. Library that I'm going to do Evanston, I did Morton Grove, I think, last month. Those are an hour, and I've done those for Vistage groups too. Ideally, probably at some point, it will be a 3-hour workshop or longer, because as noticed, with all these exercises or lessons in the book,
and talking it through, because you can't really
do them in an
by
hour.
yourself. Yeah.
Right. So what I try to do in the keynote is I make 3 simple promises or objectives. You're going to lead a more fulfilling and intentional life by paying attention. So that's the foundation. You will find ways to do a daily reflection to rejuvenate your life, reduce stress, right? Which is part of that chapter. I don't go over all 5 ways of talking about daily reflection with gratitude, but I move that in there. So any keynote has storytelling. And each one of those 2 will have stories, and then the last one, affirming or uncovering your life purpose, can relate to goals and stories of inspiration not necessarily certainly mine, but others. And so within that keynote, you want inspiration, as you want somebody to be able to take 1, 2, or 3 things away in that workshop. So they'll write. I've got a worksheet with 2 pages, 1 each side, as well as maybe talk to their partner depending upon the size of the group. If it's a group of 100, they can do that. They might have then just a postcard rather than a sheet. So it's really customized to the audience.
How much time?
How much time? And it's been fun. And that's what I plan to do probably for years to come.
Yes.
And maybe then
Because
eventually
this
do
is fun work, right?
Oh, it's fun. It's a lot of hard work.
Yes.
I've worked with a speech coach for quite a while now, Mickey Williams, who is Chicago-based. She's a Hall of Fame speaker. People go, "There's such a thing?" I go, "There is."
Yes.
And Mickey helped me develop and create my keynote, which a lot is in the book, but you don't want just to have everything in the book.
Right.
So
you have to
several of the
be
stories are not in the book.
a person too.
Right.
Right.
I just talked to my brother Ricky, who is battling liver cancer and has some really good news. It's inspirational what happened to him. So one of the things I talk about in Regrets of Life, I said, "Ricky, would it be okay I talk a little bit about you in that section and then where that's led to?" It was just last night. Literally, I'm talking to him on the phone. So it's a living, fluid presentation, which for me is
Has to
dynamic
be.
and fun.
Yes.
I probably couldn't do the same thing all the time.
That's a very good point for
Yeah.
a
And you have to
speaker
tailor it to
be
the
on
audience,
life. Yeah.
depending upon their age. Or if you're talking to a group of millennials, maybe they're not going to resonate with this, but they're going to resonate with maybe this and this, right? Starting
Yes.
simply, maybe doing a reflection, meditation.
Yes. Or just, I suppose, putting your phone down is the first is a luxury. and to write something down, to
it is
actually have
interesting.
time to think
it has
about
an off button. Everybody forgets, right? Turn it off, right? You can actually put it away. I think what's happening, though, just like books are not going away, right? These books are not going away. Hardcover, paperback. I read some electronic books. But I do think it is a different world, especially native digitals, where they're born into this. But I do think there's a point where the technology can help us be mindful. My daughter Erin and her husband Ross are temporarily living with us in between houses. And they're doing an app for meditation called Headspace. Right? And there's an app for gratitude that you could do. So I think there's all sorts of ways in many respects to get off this treadmill of not only the phone. It doesn't necessarily be bad, right? But what we carry around in our pockets is a powerful computer.
Yes, we have to control this rather than let it control us, right?
Thank you.
Okay,
and I think that's what's happening sometimes, whether it be Facebook, Twitter, it's just like this unintentional, mindless going through it.
Yes.
And then trying to find what is it that's why this uncovering your purpose, it's an unsettling thing for people.
No, you can be. I can see that.
Like,
I can
right?
see this is very.
But the good tired for me came in from Harry Chapin and his grandfather, and that became kind of a mantra for me, right? I want to be good tired. That's why I reference my dad and Manny at Nyco at my former company, because they live out this wonderful life of being good tired at the end of the day. And that's what I try to do. I don't always achieve it, but I try to remember each night. I don't always, because I'm human.
So you've been a long-time resident of Glenview,
I have.
and your children graduated from Glenview schools.
We started, over at Hanking,
So you're in the
and then
same
went
section.
through Hoffman. And then, of course, we had everybody go to Springman except our baby daughter went to Atia.
That's when they redistricted.
They redistricted, right, and we're very close. We're almost we are neighbors. And then they all went to Glenbrook South.
Okay.
And, fortunate enough that we had the ability to help them, and they all went to very good schools, and some
Yes.
have gone to graduate school and so forth. So, I think education for us was first and foremost, and my wife is a PhD, obviously set a great example.
And Glenview gave you that.
Oh.
You feel like the
When
environment?
this was a lark, how we moved here too, it was just kind of a,
How did you
Well,
tell us the
we
story?
moved back from Minnesota where I was recruited for athletics. I was playing baseball and football at University of Minnesota. And then Barbara was considering applying to graduate school down here and had a connection. And so we said, well, let's just move back. So we moved back 7 years after I moved up there. She came up a year after. True love. She left the University of Arizona. And so we moved back. We got here in 82, late 81. We bought the house in 82. Little house, $65,000. $65,000,
I
right?
don't think that you can
Buy a garage.
in Glenview
Right.
now. Though.
And Barbara got in, started her PhD a year, I think it was a year later at Loyola, and then she had Connor, and then all the 4 kids, and then she walked to get her PhD at Medina Temple, which is now Bloomingdale's, of course, from Loyola. And I think it was the coldest day in January of 1994, maybe of ever.
It used to be much colder than now, right?
Yeah, right. It was, and all 4 kids were there, in the balcony, and they all hoot and hollered. As Mom walked her up with these cool braids, and I just cried because I was so proud of her. Yeah. So we've been here, and it's been a great community for us. We joined the Glenview Community Church as members probably back when Connor was just a baby. That's been very grounding for us. The community itself, it's grown. The Glen, we used to watch the airplanes come in.
Right.
Kids loved it.
Yeah.
And then we saw it being developed. And I think the folks who have worked hard within the village of Glenview and all the different people connected, Chamber of Commerce and so forth, have worked so hard. Sometimes I think they're not thanked enough. Not like I've gone out and written thank yous, but they have. Like you even here, doing this program. What a wonderful gift for the village of Glenview.
Yes,
right?
we enjoy our community very much.
Yeah.
I love the library. We meet friends there all the time.
Oh. My mom, I grew up with books because of my mom, as I reference in the book.
Yes,
so,
yes,
she was a voracious reader, as is my oldest sister, and I think all of us love to read as all the siblings. And my girls love to read, so does my son, obviously, as a PhD. It is a place where you can just go away. And my mom, because she wasn't able to travel for economics, but also had really bad feet, she could travel in her books.
Yes, and I think people forget that now, right? There's just so much you can do when
there is, and I think the other learning, as we were discussing earlier, podcasts and other things, way we can learn. Certainly, they're great, but give me a good book. Curled up by a fire or just laying in bed.
Yes, we like to.
It's a great place.
What would you ultimately want your readers or people who attend your talks to get out from this book?
Number one, to realize that we are going to spend some time on the treadmill, this metaphoric treadmill of life, of this digital world we live in, inundated with messages and not focusing on what's important. But my hope would be that through the tools in the book, through the presentation, that they can take a few things away. Maybe your peaceful place, maybe good tired, maybe learning how to pay attention better, maybe the alpha state, that they'll spend more time off the treadmill than on it. That's my hope, that's my dream.
Yeah, that sounds like something we can all use. Thank you, Mike, for being on the program.
My pleasure. It's been a lot of fun. So conversational. You're a great host. Thank you.
And thank you for watching. Join us next time on Off the Shelf.